Now we're going to look at working within Debrief. As we covered in the first video, the user interface for Debrief is called the workbench, and it's centered on what is called the plot editor. And again, just to reiterate, this in turn is surrounded by a series of small windows which we call views. We'll come on to these shortly, but the plot editor is where your plots will be displayed and where you can work on them. Within the workbench itself, the base component for working is the project. And if you remember, we already created our base project in the previous section, and everything we see in the UI is related to the selected project. Now, the first thing we must do is to define the workspace for this project. And to do this, we need to ensure the navigator view is open. And unless you accidentally closed it, it should be. But we'll quickly go over two methods of opening this view, as it is one of the more common views in Debrief. The navigator view to Debrief is akin to Windows Explorer for your operating system, so it's essential to know how to open it. Now, the easiest way to open the navigator view are either via the menu or the quick access dialog. Now, my navigator is actually open here, so if I click on it and then I click on the cross to close it, now I'll show you the two methods of opening the navigator. The first one is to open views via the menu. Now, we're just concerned with a navigator view here, but we open all views from this same point. So what we do is we click on Window, then we click on Show View, and then we click on Navigator. And then the navigator view will open and it becomes the active view, as you can see. However, there is a much quicker way to open a view, and that's to use a keyboard combination. And a keyboard combination is a sequence of key presses that perform an action. But the only difference here is you must know the name of the view that you want to open. So what we're going to do now is I'll close the navigator view once more, and this time I'm going to use the quick access dialog, which will help us locate any item within Debrief. Now, the shortcut key for this is Control on your keyboard and then 3. As soon as you press that keyboard combination, the quick access dialog will show. Now, we're searching for the navigator view. So if I type in nav, as you can see, it tells me there's a previous choice from where I was doing this before, but the view's here, navigator general. I click on that, and again in the top left, my navigator view opens. And as we just saw, if I use the quick access dialog and select an item from the dialog, it remembers my choice. If I press Ctrl 3 again, as we can see, my previous choice of navigator is still there. So I click on navigator in the workbench, and then the quick access dialog closes, as does the navigator view. But if I press Ctrl 3 again, there's my previous choices, and I click on it, and my previous choice, which in this case is the navigator view, will display. So as you can see, opening views is really easy, and we've already seen it a few times already, but to close the views, all you do is click on the X in the tab. Now, working with views, as we mentioned before, views are small viewing panes which present information specific to the task you are carrying out in the plot editor in different ways. For example, the navigator view, that shows us our project and our project files. Now, another view, let's say for example, if I click on Debrief Test Project, and then I click on Properties, then you can see I have some tabular information about my selected object. If I click on Time Controller, then okay, there's no actual time associated with what I've selected, but as you can see, we have the sliders here and we have the various video controls. If I have a chart or a track open in the plot editor and I click on Chart Overview, then that will give me an overview of what I'm seeing in the editor, and we'll come on to that in a moment. So again, views display supporting data or properties about the selected data or tasks. And as you will see, they are an important element of Debrief, and we will use them extensively. So we've already looked at opening and closing views. Next, we'll look at other view-related tasks. Now let's talk about active or inactive objects. In any Windows program, we refer to items such as a window, a video, an image, some text, etc. as an object. And an object can only have two states. It's either selected and active, or it's not selected, inactive. And the vast majority of the time, you can only work or perform an action on an active object, i.e. something that's been selected to work on. In addition, and this applies to most computer programs or applications, there has to be an active object. This is what you've selected to work on or with. Naturally, if you want to work on an inactive object, then you must first make it active by selecting it. And this applies in most cases, though not all. And Debrief shows you which object is the active view with a blue name tab and a blue border. So if I click on the outline view in the bottom left of the window, its name tab turns blue and you can see a blue border around the view. And this view is now the active object, but the outline view is still empty. So now we'll click on the navigator view to select it, and that makes it active. So now I can perform actions within this active view. If I click on the properties view, and you can see we have property and it says info. Now the default selection when I click on the view is it will select the info property for this object. If I now want to click on, let's say, the location, and location is now the active object. So if I want to modify anything, I will be modifying the location property. And that's the way it works. And to simply make an object inactive, just click on a different object to make that object active. That's all you have to do. So again, I've clicked on the outline view. Now there are other ways of selecting objects within Debrief, and that's using the control keys and the shift keys. We use these to select multiple objects, and when this occurs, all selected items become active. Now moving on with views, there's quite possible that you'll want to reposition them as you work. So we'll now look at how to move views. And moving them is very easy, and they can be positioned anywhere around the plot editor by simply dragging and dropping. And this is very handy, as not only can you move the important features into prominent positions on your monitor when you need them, but you can also move them out of the way onto another monitor, if you have multiple monitors, or even drop them into an already open view to stack them up, and this saves screen space. So we'll do that now. So with my navigator view, if I click on it to select it, it now becomes active. Now if I left click, keep the mouse button pressed, and then drag it across onto the time controller, you can see the mouse cursor changes. If I release it on top of the time controller tab, they'll swap positions. But navigator is still the active object. If I want to drag it onto another view, if I drag it down onto chart or track or properties, the same thing happens. But did you notice there, as I dragged it down from its original position, as it got into the lower half of this view, it then gave me the option of dropping it there and positioning the navigator view underneath the time controller view. So if I drop that there now, that's what happens. Now that's looking a bit squashed, so I don't actually want to do that. So I'm going to bring the navigator view down next to the outline view. Now I can drop it on top of it, and that's what happens. Or if I take the navigator view back up to where it was with the time controller, because I'm coming from another position in the workbench, it gives me the option to drop it in that graded area. And that's what I'll do. And I'll put the navigator view back where it was initially. So that's with the views. Once we have plots open in the plot editor, we can also do the same thing, and we'll come on to that in another video. Now we'll talk about resizing views. In addition to the small windows minimize and maximize buttons here, you can also resize views by moving your mouse cursor over the borders, the boundaries of each view, and then you'll see a double-headed arrow appear. And then all you do is you left click and then you drag to the position that you want, and then release, and then the view will stay constrained to those dimensions. And again, you can drag it across or make it wider, whatever you want to do. And it's as simple as that. And once it's in position, just release the mouse button. So as you've seen, many of Debrief's functions are centered around using the mouse. But there are also menus and toolbars, and we'll look at those next.